Question 1. Which approach would be most appropriate for a physical security professional managing an intrusion detection system, IDs, when a minor, non-critical alert is triggered shortly before a scheduled, comprehensive manufacturer-recommended maintenance check is due? Option A. Proceed with the scheduled comprehensive maintenance as planned, documenting the minor alert and its resolution during the scheduled maintenance. Option B. Immediately halt all other security operations to troubleshoot and resolve the minor alert, postponing the scheduled maintenance indefinitely. Option C. Address the minor alert with a quick, undocumented fix to ensure the system appears operational, and then proceed with the scheduled maintenance at a later, unspecified date. Option D. Ignore the minor alert as it is non-critical and will likely be addressed during the upcoming scheduled maintenance, which can then be skipped. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the scheduled comprehensive maintenance as planned, documenting the minor alert and its resolution during the scheduled maintenance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term system integrity and compliance. The security manager must make a decision that could impact the effectiveness of the intrusion detection system, IDs, and potentially violate established maintenance protocols. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any deviation from standard procedures is justified, documented, and does not compromise security or regulatory adherence. The correct approach involves prioritizing the integrity of the IDS and adhering to the manufacturer's recommended maintenance schedule and the organization's established security policies. This approach ensures that the system remains fully functional, reliable, and compliant with any relevant regulatory frameworks governing physical security systems. By following the established protocols, the security manager upholds professional responsibility, maintains system performance, and avoids potential breaches or false alarms that could arise from an improperly maintained system. This aligns with the ethical obligation to provide effective security and the professional duty to maintain systems according to best practices and manufacturer specifications. An incorrect approach that involves bypassing scheduled maintenance to address a minor, non-critical alert is professionally unacceptable. This action risks overlooking a precursor to a more significant system failure, potentially compromising the entire IDS. It also demonstrates a disregard for established maintenance protocols, which are often in place to ensure optimal performance and prevent unexpected downtime. Such a decision could lead to a violation of internal security policies and potentially external regulatory requirements that mandate regular system checks and maintenance. Another incorrect approach, which is to postpone the scheduled maintenance indefinitely until a critical failure occurs, is also professionally unsound. This reactive approach is inherently risky, as it relies on the system failing before addressing its maintenance needs. This significantly increases the likelihood of a security breach or a period of vulnerability. It also suggests a lack of proactive risk management and a failure to adhere to preventative maintenance strategies, which are fundamental to maintaining a robust security posture. This approach directly contradicts the principles of due diligence and responsible system management. A third incorrect approach, which is to perform a quick, undocumented fix without consulting the manufacturer's guidelines or internal procedures, is also problematic. While it might temporarily resolve the immediate alert, it bypasses the systematic troubleshooting and documentation required for effective maintenance. This can lead to inconsistent system performance, make future troubleshooting more difficult, and obscure the root cause of the issue. Furthermore, it violates the principle of accountability and can lead to non-compliance with audit requirements and regulatory standards that necessitate proper record-keeping of all maintenance activities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the alert, its potential impact on security, and the established protocols for maintenance and troubleshooting. This includes consulting manufacturer documentation, internal security policies, and relevant regulatory guidelines. If an immediate fix is necessary, it should be performed in a controlled manner, documented thoroughly, and followed up with the appropriate scheduled maintenance or expert consultation. Prioritizing system integrity, adherence to procedures, and proactive risk management are paramount. Question 2. Implementation of a new security control system is being considered for a high-value asset storage facility. The security team has identified 3 potential threats, a sophisticated cyber attack targeting the access control system, a physical intrusion by a well-equipped criminal group, and a localized natural disaster, e.g., flash flood, that could compromise the facility's structural integrity. The budget for new security measures is limited, requiring prioritization. Which approach best aligns with the principles of risk calculation and prioritization for a PSP? Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to determine the likelihood and potential impact of each threat, and then prioritize mitigation efforts based on the calculated risk level, ensuring a documented rationale for the chosen course of action. Option B. Prioritize the physical intrusion mitigation, because it represents a direct and immediate threat to the physical assets. Option C. Prioritize the cyber attack mitigation due to its potential for widespread data compromise and the current media focus on cybersecurity. Option D. Prioritize the natural disaster mitigation by investing in structural reinforcements, as this threat has a high potential impact on the entire facility. The correct answer is C. Prioritize the cyber attack mitigation due to its potential for widespread data compromise and the current media focus on cybersecurity. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing limited resources against potentially significant risks, all while adhering to the ethical and regulatory obligations of a physical security professional, PSP. The core dilemma lies in prioritizing security investments when faced with multiple credible threats, each with varying levels of impact and likelihood. A PSP must move beyond simply identifying threats to strategically allocating resources for maximum risk reduction, ensuring compliance with relevant standards, and maintaining a responsible approach to organizational assets. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of risk assessment and prioritization, directly informed by the PSP's understanding of the organization's specific threat landscape and the regulatory framework governing physical security. This approach prioritizes actions based on a calculated understanding of risk, where risk is a function of threat likelihood and impact. By focusing on the highest calculated risks, the PSP ensures that resources are directed towards the most critical vulnerabilities, aligning with the principle of prudent risk management and demonstrating due diligence. This aligns with the general principles of professional conduct expected of a PSP, which emphasize a proactive and evidence-based approach to security. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize security enhancements based solely on the perceived sensationalism or media attention surrounding a particular threat. This is ethically and regulatorily unsound because it deviates from a data-driven risk assessment. Such an approach can lead to misallocation of resources, leaving the organization vulnerable to other, potentially more probable or impactful, threats that were overlooked. Fails to demonstrate the professional judgment required to objectively evaluate and mitigate risks. Another incorrect approach is to defer all prioritization decisions to senior management without providing a structured risk analysis. While management has ultimate authority, the PSP's role is to provide expert advice based on a thorough assessment. Abrogating this responsibility fails to leverage the PSP's specialized knowledge and can result in decisions made without a clear understanding of the underlying risks, potentially leading to suboptimal security outcomes and a failure to meet professional standards of advisory responsibility. Finally, prioritizing security upgrades based on the cost of the proposed solution rather than the risk reduction achieved is also an incorrect approach. While budget is a constraint, the primary driver for security investment should be the mitigation of identified risks. Focusing solely on cost can lead to the adoption of cheaper, less effective solutions that do not adequately address the most significant threats, thereby failing to achieve the intended risk reduction and potentially exposing the organization to greater harm. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with comprehensive threat and vulnerability assessments, followed by a structured risk calculation, even if qualitative, focusing on likelihood and impact. This analysis should then be used to prioritize mitigation strategies, documenting the rationale for each decision. Regular review and updates to the risk assessment are crucial to adapt to evolving threats and organizational changes. Question 3. Operational review demonstrates that a junior security officer has reported a potential security breach involving unauthorized access to a sensitive area, citing a suspicious individual seen near the perimeter. The established incident response plan mandates a specific protocol for verifying such reports, including immediate notification of the security manager, a preliminary on-site assessment by a senior officer, and then escalation based on findings. However, the reporting officer, feeling the urgency, has already initiated a lockdown of the affected area and is attempting to apprehend the individual without waiting for the security manager's authorization or the senior officer's assessment. What is the most appropriate course of action for the security manager to take immediately upon being notified of this situation? Option A. Instruct the junior officer to immediately cease the lockdown and apprehension, return to their post, and await the arrival of the senior officer for a proper assessment as per the incident response plan. Option B. Support the junior officer's initiative, authorize the lockdown and apprehension, and direct the senior officer to proceed directly to the scene to assist. Option C. Advise the junior officer to release the individual and stand down, as the report is unverified and could be a false alarm, to avoid unnecessary disruption. Option D. Immediately dispatch all available security personnel to the location to secure the perimeter and assist the junior officer, bypassing the standard verification steps. The correct answer is A. Instruct the junior officer to immediately cease the lockdown and apprehension, return to their post, and await the arrival of the senior officer for a proper assessment as per the incident response plan. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term security integrity and regulatory compliance. Security manager must make a judgment call that could impact both the organization's ability to function and its adherence to established protocols and legal obligations. The core of the challenge lies in the potential for a deviation from the established incident response plan to address an immediate, albeit unverified, threat, risking either a compromised response or an unnecessary disruption. The correct approach involves adhering to the established incident response plan. Even when faced with pressure to deviate, this approach is right because it ensures a systematic, documented, and defensible process for managing security incidents. The Physical Security Professional (PSP) certification emphasizes adherence to established frameworks and best practices, which are often codified in organizational policies, and by extension, regulatory expectations for due diligence in security management. Following the plan ensures that all necessary steps are taken, evidence is preserved, and communication channels are followed, minimizing the risk of further compromise or legal repercussions. This aligns with the principle of maintaining operational integrity and accountability, which are foundational to professional security practice. An incorrect approach would be to immediately deploy resources based on an unverified report without following the established incident response plan. This failure stems from bypassing the initial assessment and verification steps mandated by the plan. Such an action could lead to misallocation of resources, unnecessary panic, and a breakdown in the chain of command and communication, all of which are contrary to effective incident management and could violate organizational policies and potentially regulatory requirements for proper incident handling and reporting. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the report entirely without any form of verification or documentation. This demonstrates a failure to take potential threats seriously and neglects the duty of care expected of a security professional. It also bypasses the established procedures for reporting and investigating potential incidents, which could have significant legal and ethical ramifications if the threat later proves to be real and causes harm or loss. A third incorrect approach involves attempting to address the situation informally without engaging the designated incident response team or following the established communication protocols. This can lead to fragmented efforts, conflicting actions, and a lack of oversight, undermining the effectiveness of the response and potentially creating further security vulnerabilities. It also fails to create a clear audit trail, which is crucial for post-incident analysis and compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding and strict adherence to the organization's incident response plan. When faced with a potential incident, the first step is always to activate the plan. This includes initial assessment, verification of the reported threat, and then proceeding with the defined response actions. If the situation warrants a deviation or modification of the plan, this must be done through a documented and approved process involving relevant stakeholders and management, rather than on an ad hoc basis. Maintaining clear communication, thorough documentation, and a commitment to established procedures are paramount. Question 4. During the evaluation of a company's business continuity and disaster recovery plans, a physical security professional identifies that the current plans primarily focus on immediate post-event physical asset protection and do not adequately detail the procedures for restoring critical security systems or ensuring the continuity of essential security monitoring functions during a prolonged disruption. What is the most appropriate course of action for the physical security professional to recommend? Option A. Propose a plan to replace all existing security systems with newer, more robust technology, assuming this will inherently address the business continuity and disaster recovery gaps without a formal plan update. Option B. Recommend a comprehensive review and update of the business continuity and disaster recovery plans to explicitly integrate physical security system restoration, continuity of essential monitoring, and personnel safety protocols, aligning them with critical business function recovery timelines. Option C. Suggests that the existing plans are sufficient for physical security's role, as the primary responsibility for business continuity lies with IT and operational departments, and physical security's involvement should be limited to damage assessment. Option D. Advise the company to prioritize the immediate physical securing of all assets and facilities, deferring the restoration of security systems and monitoring until after all other business operations have resumed. The correct answer is B. Recommend a comprehensive review and update of the business continuity and disaster recovery plans to explicitly integrate physical security system restoration, continuity of essential monitoring, and personnel safety protocols, aligning them with critical business function recovery timelines. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term compliance and risk mitigation, specifically concerning business continuity and disaster recovery planning under the Physical Security Professional (PSP) certifications regulatory framework, which is implicitly U.S.-based for this context. The challenge lies in ensuring that security measures not only protect assets during normal operations, but also facilitate rapid recovery and continued essential functions during disruptive events, all while adhering to relevant U.S. regulations and industry best practices. Careful judgment is required to prioritize actions that have the most significant impact on resilience and compliance. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of existing business continuity and disaster recovery plans, focusing on their integration with physical security protocols. This includes verifying that the plans address potential threats to physical security infrastructure, outline clear procedures for personnel safety and evacuation, detail methods for securing critical assets during an event, and establish protocols for restoring security operations post-disaster. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the principles of proactive risk management and regulatory compliance, mandated by frameworks such as those referenced by the PSP certification, which emphasize the importance of integrated security and resilience strategies. For instance, standards like those from NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, or FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, often guide such planning, requiring a holistic view of security and continuity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate physical security post-event, without considering the continuity of essential business functions or the recovery of security systems, fails to meet the broader objectives of business continuity and disaster recovery. This neglects the regulatory expectation that organizations must be able to resume critical operations in a timely manner, thereby increasing financial losses and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the restoration of non-essential security systems before critical ones overlooks the tiered nature of recovery efforts and the principle of prioritizing essential business functions. This can lead to a prolonged disruption of core operations and a failure to meet recovery time objectives, RTO, as defined in business continuity plans. A third incorrect approach that relies on outdated or unverified disaster recovery plans without conducting regular testing and updates is also professionally unacceptable. Regulations and best practices consistently emphasize the need for validated plans. Failure to test and update plans means they may not be effective when a real event occurs, leading to significant operational failures and potential noncompliance with legal or contractual obligations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic assessment of current plans against regulatory requirements and best practices. This includes identifying gaps, prioritizing remediation efforts based on risk and impact, and ensuring that all stakeholders are involved in the planning and testing process. The focus should always be on creating a resilient security posture that supports overall business continuity. Question 5. Operational review demonstrates that the physical security program for a critical infrastructure facility faces a wide array of potential threats, including severe weather events, insider threats, and the risk of critical system failures due to aging technology. The security team has limited resources for immediate upgrades and training. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for immediate action with the requirement for a comprehensive and compliant security posture? Option A. Invest in advanced surveillance technology to detect and deter all types of threats, assuming that technological solutions can broadly mitigate all identified risks. Option B. Implement a phased risk mitigation plan that prioritizes threats based on a comprehensive assessment of likelihood and impact across natural, human-caused, and technological categories, allocating resources proportionally to address the highest priority risks first. Option C. Focus all available resources on immediate enhancements to perimeter security and access control systems to counter the most frequently reported human-caused security incidents. Option D. Develop a detailed emergency response plan specifically for natural disasters, as these are perceived as the most potentially catastrophic events, and defer other security improvements. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased risk mitigation plan that prioritizes threats based on a comprehensive assessment of likelihood and impact across natural, human-caused, and technological categories, allocating resources proportionally to address the highest priority risks first. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a physical security professional to balance immediate operational needs with long-term strategic planning, all while adhering to specific regulatory frameworks. The core difficulty lies in prioritizing limited resources and attention across diverse threat categories, ensuring that the chosen approach is not only effective, but also compliant with relevant standards and ethical obligations. A robust physical security program must proactively address a spectrum of potential disruptions, from environmental hazards to malicious human actions and system failures. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that systematically identifies, analyzes, and prioritizes all potential threats, considering their likelihood and potential impact. This methodology aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible security management, which are often codified in industry standards and best practices that inform regulatory expectations. By adopting a holistic view, the professional ensures that all threat categories are considered, allowing for the development of layered security strategies that are proportionate to the identified risks. This proactive and systematic process is essential for demonstrating a commitment to safeguarding assets and personnel, a key tenet of professional responsibility. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, visible threats, such as human-caused incidents, fails to adequately address the potential for significant disruption from natural disasters or technological failures. This narrow focus can lead to vulnerabilities in areas that may seem less probable but could have catastrophic consequences, such as a severe weather event or a critical system malfunction. Such an oversight could be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence and could expose the organization to unacceptable risks, potentially violating regulatory requirements for comprehensive risk management. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes only the most frequently occurring threats without considering the severity of their potential impact is also professionally unsound. While frequent, low-impact events might consume resources, neglecting less frequent but high-impact threats, such as a major natural disaster or a sophisticated cyber-physical attack, can leave the organization critically exposed. This selective prioritization demonstrates a lack of strategic foresight and can lead to significant financial and reputational damage, failing to meet the professional obligation to protect the organization comprehensively. Finally, an approach that relies solely on reactive measures, addressing threats only after they have occurred, is fundamentally flawed. While incident response is a crucial component of security, a proactive and preventative strategy is paramount. A purely reactive stance fails to leverage the principles of risk mitigation and can lead to repeated disruptions and escalating costs. Professional decision-making in physical security requires a forward-looking perspective, integrating risk assessment, threat intelligence, and proactive control measures to build resilience and minimize the likelihood and impact of security incidents. Question 6. Performance analysis shows that a retail organization has experienced a recent increase in shoplifting incidents. The security manager is tasked with updating the threat assessment to ensure adequate security measures are in place. Which of the following approaches best aligns with a proactive and comprehensive threat identification and analysis process for this organization? Option A. Rely on media reports of widespread retail crime trends to justify a significant increase in security personnel across all store locations. Option B. Implement a policy that assumes all customers are potential shoplifters and requires intrusive searches of all individuals entering and exiting the premises. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential threat actors, their motivations and capabilities, and analyzes the organization's specific vulnerabilities to various types of theft, considering both historical data and emerging trends. Option D. Focus security resources exclusively on increasing surveillance in areas where past shoplifting incidents have been most frequent, based on incident reports. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential threat actors, their motivations and capabilities, and analyzes the organization's specific vulnerabilities to various types of theft, considering both historical data and emerging trends. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a security manager to move beyond a reactive stance to a proactive one, identifying potential threats before they materialize. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the likelihood and impact of various threats in a dynamic environment, ensuring that resources are allocated effectively and that security measures are proportionate to the identified risks. Careful judgment is required to balance security needs with operational efficiency and to avoid both underprotection and overprotection, which can lead to unnecessary costs or operational disruptions. Correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of threat identification and analysis, grounded in established security principles and, where applicable, regulatory requirements. This approach prioritizes understanding the specific vulnerabilities of the asset or organization and the potential motivations and capabilities of threat actors. By conducting a thorough risk assessment that considers both the likelihood of a threat occurring and its potential impact, security managers can develop a prioritized list of threats and inform the selection of appropriate mitigation strategies. This aligns with the fundamental principles of professional security management, which emphasize a risk-based approach to decision-making. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on historical incidents fails to account for emerging threats or changes in the threat landscape. This reactive posture can leave an organization vulnerable to novel attack vectors or evolving threat actor tactics. It represents an ethical failure by not exercising due diligence in anticipating potential risks. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal intuition, without a structured analytical framework, lacks the objectivity and rigor necessary for effective threat identification. This can lead to misallocation of resources, focusing on perceived threats rather than actual ones, and may not satisfy any regulatory or compliance obligations that require a documented risk assessment. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes the most sensational or publicized threats, without considering their relevance to the specific organization or its assets, is also professionally unsound. This can lead to a misdirection of efforts and resources towards threats that have a low probability of impacting the organization, while neglecting more probable, albeit less dramatic, risks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with defining the scope of the assessment, followed by systematic threat identification, vulnerability analysis, and impact assessment. This should be an iterative process, with regular reviews and updates to reflect changes in the threat environment and organizational operations. The framework should be documented to ensure transparency, accountability, and compliance with any relevant standards or regulations. Question 7. Quality control measures reveal that the current threat modeling process for a critical infrastructure facility is not adequately identifying emerging physical security risks. The security team needs to adopt a more robust and business-aligned methodology, considering the need to prioritize threats based on their potential impact on operational continuity and business objectives. Which threat modeling methodology would be most appropriate for optimizing the facility's physical security program? Option A: STRIDE spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, elevation of privilege. Option B: a generic ad hoc threat identification process. Option C: focusing exclusively on known historical security incidents. Option D: process for attack simulation and threat analysis, PASTA. The correct answer is D: process for attack simulation and threat analysis, PASTA. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the physical security professional to select the most appropriate threat modeling methodology for a critical infrastructure facility, balancing the need for comprehensive analysis with the practical constraints of implementation. The choice of methodology directly impacts the effectiveness of the security program in identifying and mitigating potential threats. Careful judgment is required to ensure the chosen method aligns with the facility's specific risks and operational context, adhering to industry best practices and regulatory expectations. The correct approach involves utilizing the PASTA, process for attack simulation and threat analysis, methodology. PASTA is a risk-centric threat modeling methodology that aligns security risks with business objectives. It begins by defining business objectives, then identifies critical assets, analyzes threats, and simulates attacks to determine vulnerabilities. This approach is superior because it directly links threat modeling to business impact, ensuring that security efforts are focused on protecting what matters most to the organization. This aligns with the overarching goal of physical security to protect assets and ensure operational continuity, a principle implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate risk-based security assessments for critical infrastructure. PASTA iterative nature also allows for continuous refinement of the security posture as the threat landscape evolves. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the STRIDE, spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, elevation of privilege model without further contextualization. While STRIDE is a valuable tool for identifying potential threats at a granular level, it is primarily a software-centric threat modeling framework. Applying it directly to physical security without adaptation or integration into a broader risk assessment framework can lead to an incomplete understanding of physical threats and their impact on business operations. It fails to adequately consider the business context and the specific physical vulnerabilities of the facility, potentially leading to misallocation of resources. Another incorrect approach would be to adopt a generic ad hoc threat identification process that lacks a structured methodology. This approach is problematic because it is prone to omissions, biases, and inconsistencies. Without a systematic framework like PASTA or even a well-adapted STRIDE, the security team may overlook critical threats or fail to prioritize them effectively. This lack of structured analysis can lead to compliance gaps and an inadequate security posture, failing to meet the due diligence expected of a physical security professional responsible for critical infrastructure. Finally, focusing exclusively on known historical incidents without proactive threat modeling is an insufficient approach. While historical data is valuable, it does not account for emerging threats or novel attack vectors. A robust threat modeling methodology must be forward-looking and predictive, anticipating potential threats rather than merely reacting to past events. This reactive stance fails to meet the proactive requirements of modern physical security and regulatory expectations for comprehensive risk management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding business objectives and critical assets first. This should be followed by selecting a threat modeling methodology that best aligns with these objectives and the specific context of the physical environment. PASTA business-centric approach makes it a strong candidate for critical infrastructure. If STRIDE is considered, it should be adapted and integrated within a broader risk assessment framework that includes business impact analysis. Regular review and updates to the threat model are essential to maintain an effective security program. Question 8. The risk matrix shows a clear delineation of identified threats based on their likelihood and potential impact. A physical security professional is tasked with developing a mitigation strategy for a facility. Which of the following approaches best aligns with established physical security principles and practices for prioritizing security investments? Option A. Concentrate mitigation on threats with the highest likelihood, even if their potential impact is low. Option B. Prioritize mitigation for threats with the highest potential impact, irrespective of their likelihood. Option C. Focus mitigation efforts on threats that fall within the high likelihood, high impact quadrant of the risk matrix. Option D. Address all identified threats with equal urgency, regardless of their position on the risk matrix. The correct answer is C. Focus mitigation efforts on threats that fall within the high likelihood, high impact quadrant of the risk matrix. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security professional to move beyond a purely reactive stance and proactively identify potential vulnerabilities before they are exploited. The core of the challenge lies in translating a theoretical risk assessment into practical, actionable security measures that are both effective and cost-efficient, while adhering to established professional standards and ethical obligations. The need to prioritize resources based on the likelihood and impact of threats, rather than simply addressing every perceived risk, demands a nuanced understanding of risk management principles. The correct approach involves systematically evaluating identified risks against their potential impact and likelihood of occurrence. As depicted on the risk matrix, this allows for the prioritization of mitigation strategies, focusing resources on the most critical threats. This aligns with the fundamental principles of physical security management, which emphasize a proactive, risk-based approach to protecting assets. Professional standards and ethical guidelines for security professionals consistently advocate for such a systematic and evidence-based methodology to ensure the responsible allocation of security resources and the effective reduction of organizational risk. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the highest likelihood risks, regardless of their potential impact, fails to acknowledge that low-impact but highly probable events may not warrant the same level of resource investment as high-impact, even if less probable, events. This can lead to inefficient resource allocation and a misdirection of efforts away from more critical vulnerabilities. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes risks based on the most severe potential impact, without considering the likelihood of occurrence, can lead to overspending on improbable scenarios while neglecting more immediate and probable threats. This is an inefficient use of resources and does not reflect a balanced risk management strategy. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal intuition rather than the structured data presented in the risk matrix is professionally unsound. This deviates from established risk assessment methodologies and can result in biased decision-making, overlooking critical data points, and leading to inadequate security provisions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the risk assessment methodology and the risk matrix itself. They must then critically analyze each identified risk, considering both its likelihood and potential impact. The next step involves identifying and evaluating potential mitigation strategies, assessing their effectiveness and cost. Finally, decisions on resource allocation and implementation should be made based on this comprehensive analysis, ensuring alignment with organizational objectives and professional best practices. Question 9. Governance review demonstrates that the primary vehicle access gate to a sensitive research facility is experiencing significant delays during peak operational hours, leading to frustration among authorized personnel and potential security vulnerabilities due to prolonged gate openings. The facility operates under strict U.S. federal regulations pertaining to the protection of critical infrastructure. Considering these factors, which of the following approaches best addresses the identified issues while maintaining compliance with relevant U.S. federal regulations? Option A. Remove the automated gate system and revert to manual gate operation with security guards performing visual identification of all incoming vehicles. Option B. Implement a multi-factor authentication system at the gate, incorporating credential readers with biometric verification, coupled with trained security personnel to conduct random spot checks and monitor the system's integrity. Option C. Install a simple automated gate that opens upon approach, with a sign instructing drivers to report any unauthorized access to security. Option D. Upgrade the automated gate system to a faster opening and closing mechanism without any changes to the verification process. The correct answer is B. Implement a multi-factor authentication system at the gate, incorporating credential readers with biometric verification, coupled with trained security personnel to conduct random spot checks and monitor the system's integrity. Explanation: This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with robust security protocols, all while adhering to specific regulatory mandates for physical security. The challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant method for managing access at a critical ingress point without compromising security or unduly hindering authorized personnel. A careful judgment is required to select an approach that aligns with the physical security professional, PSP. Exams focus on practical application of security principles within a defined regulatory context. The correct approach involves implementing a layered security strategy that combines technology with human oversight at the gate. This approach is right because it acknowledges that no single security measure is foolproof. By integrating electronic access control systems with trained personnel to monitor and verify, it creates a more resilient barrier against unauthorized entry. This aligns with the principles of defense in depth, a core concept in physical security, and implicitly supports regulatory requirements that often mandate a combination of measures for critical infrastructure or sensitive areas. The emphasis on verification and monitoring ensures that the access control system is not merely a passive barrier, but an active component of the security posture, which is a common expectation in professional security standards and often reflected in compliance frameworks. An approach that relies solely on an automated gate without any human verification is professionally unacceptable. This fails to account for potential system malfunctions, sophisticated bypass techniques, or the need for immediate human judgment in ambiguous situations, creates a significant security gap, and likely violates regulations that require demonstrable control and verification of access, not just the physical presence of a barrier. An approach that prioritizes speed of entry over verification, even with an automated system, is also professionally unsound. This directly undermines the purpose of an access control point, which is to control and verify who is entering. It introduces a high risk of unauthorized access, which could have severe consequences and would be a clear violation of security best practices and likely regulatory mandates for controlled access. An approach that involves only manual checks without any technological support, while seemingly secure, can be inefficient and prone to human error, especially under high traffic conditions. While not as egregious as the other incorrect approaches, it may not meet the operational demands or the level of accountability expected in modern security environments, and could fall short of regulatory expectations for technological integration and audit trails. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment of the access point, considering the assets being protected, the potential threats, and the operational requirements. This assessment should then inform the selection of security measures that provide the necessary level of control and verification, in compliance with relevant regulations and industry standards. A layered approach, combining technology and human elements, is often the most effective and compliant solution. Question 10. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of potential security weaknesses. When conducting a vulnerability assessment for a critical infrastructure facility, which approach best aligns with industry best practices for identifying and prioritizing risks? Option A. Relying solely on past security incident reports to identify vulnerabilities without considering emerging threats or future operational changes. Option B. Focusing exclusively on implementing the latest security technologies and physical barriers, regardless of specific identified threats or operational impact. Option C. Conducting a comprehensive threat and vulnerability analysis that prioritizes assets based on their criticality and the potential impact of identified threats, leading to a prioritized list of mitigation strategies. Option D. Performing a superficial review of readily apparent security weaknesses, such as unlocked doors or visible cameras, without a systematic analysis of potential threat actors or their methodologies. The correct answer is C. Conducting a comprehensive threat and vulnerability analysis that prioritizes assets based on their criticality and the potential impact of identified threats, leading to a prioritized list of mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for comprehensive vulnerability assessment with the practical constraints of budget and operational impact. A security professional must identify potential threats and weaknesses without unduly disrupting legitimate business activities or incurring excessive costs. The core of the challenge lies in prioritizing resources effectively to address the most significant risks. The correct approach involves a systematic, risk-based methodology that aligns with industry best practices and regulatory expectations for physical security. This approach prioritizes identifying critical assets, analyzing potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to those assets, and then evaluating the likelihood and impact of those threats materializing. The outcome is a prioritized list of mitigation strategies that are both effective and cost-efficient, ensuring compliance with general security principles and any applicable industry-specific guidelines that mandate a proactive risk management posture. An approach that focuses solely on the most visible or easily identifiable vulnerabilities is incorrect because it neglects less obvious but potentially more damaging weaknesses. This failure to conduct a thorough and systematic assessment can lead to a false sense of security and leave critical assets exposed. An approach that recommends implementing every conceivable security control without regard to cost or operational impact is also incorrect. This demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and an inability to prioritize, potentially leading to wasted resources and an inefficient security program. It fails to adhere to the principle of proportionality in security measures. An approach that relies exclusively on historical incident data without considering emerging threats or future trends is flawed. While historical data is valuable, it is insufficient on its own. Comprehensive vulnerability assessment must be forward-looking, anticipating potential new threats and evolving vulnerabilities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This begins with defining the scope and objectives of the assessment, followed by asset identification and criticality analysis. Next, threats and vulnerabilities are identified and analyzed for likelihood and impact. Finally, mitigation strategies are developed, prioritized, and implemented, with a plan for ongoing review and adaptation. This iterative process ensures that security measures remain relevant and effective. Question 11. Compliance review shows that a proposed modification to the access control system's credentialing process has been initiated to streamline employee onboarding. The security team is considering several approaches to manage this change. Which approach best aligns with the principles of change management and continuous improvement as expected of a physical security professional PSP? Option A. Focus primarily on the cost savings associated with the new credentialing process, assuming that any security implications will be minor and manageable post-implementation. Option B. Implement the new credentialing process immediately to reduce onboarding delays, relying on the IT department's assurance that the system remains secure. Option C. Proceed with the change based on positive feedback from a few key department heads who believe it will improve efficiency. Without further formal evaluation, Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the proposed changes, consult with relevant departments, pilot the new process in a controlled environment, and obtain formal approval before full deployment. The correct answer is B. Implement the new credentialing process immediately to reduce onboarding delays, relying on the IT department's assurance that the system remains secure. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term imperative of maintaining robust physical security controls. A hasty change without proper assessment risks introducing vulnerabilities that could be exploited, leading to security breaches, loss of assets, or compromise of sensitive information. The core challenge lies in ensuring that any modification to a security system or procedure is thoroughly evaluated for its impact on overall security posture and compliance with established standards. The correct approach involves a structured change management process that includes a comprehensive risk assessment, stakeholder consultation, pilot testing, and a formal approval workflow before full implementation. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement, which mandate that changes are data-driven and designed to enhance, not degrade, security effectiveness. Specifically, adherence to the Physical Security Professional (PSP) body of knowledge emphasizes a systematic approach to managing changes, ensuring that all potential impacts are considered and mitigated. This process is ethically sound as it prioritizes the protection of assets and personnel, fulfilling the security professional's duty of care. Implementing changes without a formal risk assessment is an incorrect approach because it bypasses a critical step in identifying potential vulnerabilities. This failure to proactively assess risks violates the ethical obligation to maintain a secure environment and could lead to non-compliance with organizational policies or industry best practices, which are often implicitly or explicitly guided by PSP principles. Adopting changes based solely on cost savings without evaluating their security implications is also an incorrect approach. While fiscal responsibility is important, it must not supersede the primary objective of security. This approach demonstrates a failure to prioritize security needs and could result in a weakened defense, potentially leading to greater financial losses than the initial savings. It neglects the ethical responsibility to safeguard assets, proceeding with changes based on informal feedback from a limited number of personnel, without a broader impact analysis or formal validation, is another incorrect approach. This method lacks the rigor required for effective change management and may overlook critical operational or security concerns held by other stakeholders. It represents a departure from the systematic, evidence-based decision-making expected of a PSP. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's security policies and procedures, a commitment to a documented change management framework, and a proactive approach to risk identification and mitigation. Security professionals must advocate for a thorough, systematic evaluation of any proposed change, ensuring that it is aligned with security objectives and regulatory requirements before implementation. Question 12. Investigation of a corporate campus perimeter fence line security upgrade requires the selection of appropriate lighting technology. The primary objectives are to deter unauthorized access, facilitate clear visual identification of individuals and objects at night, and minimize ongoing operational costs. Considering the current regulatory environment and industry best practices in the United States, which lighting technology would be the most suitable and compliant choice for this application? Option A, metal halide lighting. Option B, LED lighting. Option C, high-pressure sodium lighting. Option D, incandescent lighting. The correct answer is B, LED lighting. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in physical security, where the selection of lighting technology must balance operational effectiveness, energy efficiency, and compliance with evolving regulatory standards. The professional challenge lies in understanding the nuanced performance characteristics of different lighting types and how they align with specific security objectives and applicable regulations, without over-reliance on outdated or inappropriate technologies. Careful judgment is required to avoid costly misinvestments and to ensure the chosen lighting actively contributes to the security posture rather than becoming a liability. The correct approach involves selecting LED lighting for the perimeter fence line. This is justified by its superior energy efficiency, long lifespan, and excellent color rendering capabilities, which are crucial for accurate visual identification of individuals and objects, especially in low-light conditions. Furthermore, LED technology is increasingly favored by regulatory bodies and industry best practices for its environmental benefits and reduced maintenance requirements. While not explicitly mandated by a single overarching physical security lighting regulation, in the U.S., the trend towards energy efficiency standards, like those promoted by the Department of Energy, and the inherent security benefits of better illumination align with the general principles of effective physical security as outlined by organizations like ASEES International, which emphasizes a risk-based approach and the use of appropriate technology. An incorrect approach would be to specify incandescent lighting. This is a failure because incandescent bulbs are highly inefficient, have a short lifespan, and produce a warm, yellowish light that can distort color perception, hindering accurate identification. Their high energy consumption also runs counter to modern sustainability initiatives and potential future energy efficiency mandates. Another incorrect approach would be to recommend metal halide lighting without careful consideration of its drawbacks for this specific application. While metal halide offers high light output, it suffers from a significant warm-up period before reaching full brightness and can experience restrike delays after power interruption, creating temporary blind spots that compromise security. Its color rendering can also be less consistent than LED. Finally, selecting high-pressure sodium lighting would be an incorrect approach. This technology is known for its distinctive orange-yellow hue, which severely distorts color perception, making it difficult to distinguish between different colors of clothing, vehicles, or other critical details. While it offers good lumen output, the poor color rendering is a significant detriment to effective visual surveillance and identification, which are primary goals of perimeter lighting. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, identifying the specific security objectives for the area to be illuminated. This should be followed by an evaluation of available lighting technologies, considering their performance characteristics, e.g., lumen output, color rendering index, warm-up time, lifespan, energy consumption, against these objectives. Crucially, the assessment must also incorporate current and anticipated regulatory requirements, industry best practices, and budgetary constraints. A phased approach, perhaps involving pilot testing of different technologies, can also mitigate risks. Question 13. The evaluation methodology shows that a facility is considering the implementation of a perimeter intrusion detection system, PIDS. The site is characterized by a large, open area with significant vegetation and is located in a region prone to moderate wind and occasional fog. The facility operates 24/7 and requires a high degree of certainty in detecting intrusions while minimizing false alarms. Considering the need for regulatory compliance and operational effectiveness, which PIDS technology would be most appropriate for this scenario? Option A. An infrared PIDS system, which relies on detecting thermal signatures, but could be prone to false alarms due to temperature fluctuations caused by fog or wind, and may have limitations in detecting low-profile intrusions. Option B. Microwave PIDS system, known for its long-range detection capabilities, which might be susceptible to false alarms from wind-blown debris or fog, potentially impacting its reliability in this environment. Option C. A fiber optic PIDS system, which detects physical disturbances along the cable, but may require extensive trenching and could be more vulnerable to damage from vegetation growth or ground movement compared to other buried options. Option D. A buried cable PIDS system, designed to detect ground vibrations and disturbances, offering resilience to environmental factors like wind and fog, and capable of meeting stringent detection probability requirements. The correct answer is D. A buried cable PIDS system, designed to detect ground vibrations and disturbances, offering resilience to environmental factors like wind and fog, and capable of meeting stringent detection probability requirements. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical need for a physical security professional to select the most appropriate perimeter intrusion detection system, PIDS, based on specific site characteristics and regulatory compliance. This scenario is professionally challenging because the selection of a PIDS is not merely a technical choice. It directly impacts the effectiveness of security, the potential for false alarms, operational costs, and crucially, adherence to relevant regulations and standards. A misstep can lead to security vulnerabilities, increased operational burden, and non-compliance, potentially resulting in penalties or loss of accreditation. Careful judgment is required to balance technological capabilities with the specific environmental, operational, and regulatory context. The correct approach involves selecting a PIDS that aligns with the site's specific environmental conditions, operational requirements, and relevant regulatory frameworks, such as those outlined by the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, for critical infrastructure protection or specific industry standards. For instance, if the site is prone to environmental interference like heavy foliage or wildlife, a buried cable system might be chosen for its robustness against such factors, provided it meets the detection range and accuracy requirements stipulated by applicable standards. The justification for this approach lies in its adherence to the principle of selecting technology that is fit for purpose and compliant with established security guidelines, ensuring both efficacy and regulatory alignment. An incorrect approach would be to select a PIDS based solely on cost or perceived technological advancement, without considering site-specific factors or regulatory mandates. For example, choosing an infrared PIDS for an area with significant temperature fluctuations or atmospheric interference could lead to a high rate of false alarms, undermining its effectiveness and potentially violating operational standards that require a certain level of detection accuracy and minimal nuisance alarms. Similarly, deploying a microwave PIDS in a densely populated area without proper site surveys and adherence to electromagnetic interference regulations could lead to unintended consequences and noncompliance. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook the specific detection performance requirements outlined in relevant security standards, opting for a system that does not meet the minimum acceptable probability of detection or maximum acceptable probability of false alarm, thereby failing to meet the core objectives of perimeter security as defined by regulatory bodies. Professional reasoning in such situations requires a systematic process. First, thoroughly assess the site's physical characteristics, environmental conditions, and operational needs. Second, identify all applicable regulatory frameworks, standards, and guidelines relevant to the specific industry and location. Third, evaluate different PIDs technologies against these identified requirements, considering their strengths, weaknesses, and suitability for the given context. Finally, select the PIDs that offers the best balance of performance, reliability, cost-effectiveness, and, most importantly, regulatory compliance, ensuring a robust and defensible security posture. Question 14. The efficiency study reveals that the current budget for enhancing barrier deterrent systems is insufficient to implement all proposed upgrades simultaneously. The primary focus areas are improving perimeter lighting, updating signage to reflect current access control policies, and expanding CCTV surveillance coverage in high-risk zones. Given these constraints, which implementation strategy best balances immediate security needs, regulatory compliance, and long-term effectiveness? Option A. Implement a comprehensive upgrade of perimeter lighting to ensure consistent and adequate illumination across all vulnerable areas, followed by a review of signage effectiveness. Option B. Prioritize the installation of high-resolution CCTV cameras in identified high-risk zones, as surveillance is the most direct method of detection and evidence gathering. Option C. Undertake a phased approach, beginning with essential lighting upgrades to support existing surveillance and ensure basic visibility, followed by compliant signage, and then expanding surveillance coverage as further funds become available. Option D. Focus on updating all signage to clearly communicate security policies and restrictions, as clear communication is the first line of deterrence. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the installation of high-resolution CCTV cameras in identified high-risk zones, as surveillance is the most direct method of detection and evidence gathering. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge, where budget constraints necessitate prioritizing certain physical security enhancements over others, while still aiming to meet regulatory compliance and operational effectiveness. The challenge lies in balancing cost-effectiveness with the fundamental requirements of a robust barrier deterrent system, specifically focusing on lighting, signage, and surveillance. Professionals must navigate these competing demands by adhering to established standards and best practices, ensuring that the chosen solutions provide a meaningful deterrent and support overall security objectives without compromising critical security functions. The correct approach involves a phased implementation strategy that prioritizes the most impactful and legally mandated elements first. This means ensuring adequate lighting for visibility and surveillance, clear and compliant signage to inform individuals of security measures and restrictions, and strategically place surveillance to monitor key areas. This approach aligns with the principles of layered security and risk mitigation, ensuring that essential deterrence and monitoring capabilities are in place. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing workplace safety and property protection, often implicitly or explicitly require adequate lighting for hazard identification and crime prevention. Similarly, signage is crucial for communicating rules, warnings, and legal requirements, such as those related to trespass or restricted access. Surveillance, while not always a direct regulatory mandate for all facilities, is a widely accepted best practice for deterring criminal activity and providing evidence. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the most visible or technologically advanced component, such as high-end surveillance cameras, while neglecting fundamental elements like adequate lighting. Insufficient lighting can render surveillance systems ineffective, especially during low-light conditions, and can create blind spots that criminals can exploit. This failure to provide basic visibility undermines the deterrent effect of other security measures and can be a violation of general duty of care principles related to maintaining a safe environment. Another incorrect approach would be to install generic or insufficient signage that does not clearly communicate security protocols or legal restrictions. This can lead to confusion, accidental violations, or a perception that security is not taken seriously, diminishing its deterrent value and potentially creating liability issues. Prioritizing cost savings by opting for the cheapest available options across all three categories without regard for their effectiveness or compliance with relevant standards is also a flawed strategy. This can result in systems that are easily defeated, unreliable, or fail to meet the minimum requirements for deterrence and monitoring, ultimately proving more costly in the long run due to increased security incidents. Professionals should employ a risk-based approach, first identifying critical assets and vulnerabilities. They should then consult relevant industry standards and regulatory requirements to determine the minimum acceptable levels for lighting, signage, and surveillance. A phased implementation plan, starting with the most critical and cost-effective measures that address immediate risks and compliance needs, is advisable. Continuous evaluation and adaptation of the security system based on threat assessments and operational feedback are also essential for maintaining effectiveness. Question 15. When evaluating the physical security of a large corporate campus, what is the most effective and professionally responsible approach to asset identification and valuation, considering limited resources and the need to minimize operational disruption? Option A. Implement a phased approach, beginning with a broad inventory of all potential physical assets, followed by detailed valuation of high-priority assets based on criticality and potential impact of loss. Option B. Delegate the entire asset identification and valuation process to individual departmental managers without providing specific security valuation guidelines or oversight. Option C. Conduct exhaustive, detailed valuations for every single physical asset identified across the entire campus immediately. Option D. Rely exclusively on the book value of assets, as recorded in the company's financial statements for all security valuation purposes. The correct answer is A. Implement a phased approach, beginning with a broad inventory of all potential physical assets, followed by detailed valuation of high-priority assets based on criticality and potential impact of loss. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the physical security manager must balance the need for comprehensive asset identification and valuation with the practical limitations of resources and the potential for disruption to ongoing operations. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that all critical assets are identified and their value accurately assessed without causing undue burden or compromising security during the process. This requires a strategic approach that prioritizes effectively and leverages available information. The correct approach involves a phased implementation, starting with a broad inventory and then conducting detailed valuations for high-priority assets. This method is professionally sound because it aligns with the principles of risk management, which dictate that resources should be focused on the most critical elements. By first identifying all potential assets and then applying a tiered valuation based on criticality, the security manager can ensure that the most valuable and vulnerable assets receive the most thorough assessment. This systematic process also supports compliance with industry, best practices, and potential regulatory requirements for asset protection and accountability. Even if specific regulations are not explicitly detailed in this context, the underlying principles of due diligence and responsible management are universally applicable. An incorrect approach would be to immediately conduct exhaustive, detailed valuations for every single asset identified. This is professionally unacceptable because it is an inefficient use of resources, potentially leading to significant delays and operational disruptions. It fails to acknowledge the principle of proportionality in risk management, where the effort expended on valuation should be commensurate with the asset's value and risk. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the book value of assets as recorded in financial statements for valuation. This is professionally flawed because book value often does not reflect the actual replacement cost, market value, or the strategic importance of an asset to the organization's operations. Physical security valuations need to consider factors beyond accounting figures, such as the cost to replace, the impact of loss, and the criticality of the asset to business continuity. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire asset identification and valuation process to departmental managers without providing clear guidelines or oversight. This is professionally unsound as it lacks standardization and quality control. Departmental managers may have varying levels of understanding regarding security asset valuation, leading to inconsistent and potentially inaccurate assessments. It also bypasses the security professional's responsibility to ensure a comprehensive and accurate security posture. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the organization's overall objectives and risk tolerance. This involves consulting with stakeholders to define what constitutes a critical asset. The process should then involve developing a clear methodology for identification and valuation, prioritizing based on risk and value, and implementing in phases. Regular review and updates to the asset inventory and valuation are also crucial components of effective physical security management. Question 16. The risk matrix shows a significant increase in unauthorized perimeter breaches, leading to operational disruptions and potential data compromise. The organization is considering several approaches to enhance perimeter security. Which approach best aligns with the principles of effective physical security management and due diligence? Option A. Invest in state-of-the-art motion sensors and thermal imaging cameras across the perimeter, while maintaining existing physical barriers. Option B. Install additional high-tensile fencing and deploy more guard patrols along the entire perimeter without upgrading detection capabilities. Option C. Implement a layered security strategy that combines reinforced physical barriers, advanced intrusion detection systems, and a well-defined incident response plan. Option D. Increase the number of security personnel stationed at key entry points and rely on their visual observation to detect and respond to breaches. The correct answer is C. Implement a layered security strategy that combines reinforced physical barriers, advanced intrusion detection systems, and a well-defined incident response plan. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the organization is facing a significant increase in unauthorized perimeter breaches, directly impacting its operational continuity and reputation. The decision-maker must balance the immediate need for enhanced security with the long-term implications of cost, operational disruption, and potential regulatory noncompliance if the chosen solution is not appropriate or effective. Careful judgment is required to select a perimeter security strategy that is both robust and sustainable, aligning with the organization's risk tolerance and available resources. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the perimeter's vulnerabilities, considering the specific threat landscape identified in the risk matrix, and then implementing a layered security strategy that integrates physical barriers, detection systems, and response protocols. This approach is professionally sound because it is proactive, evidence-based, and aligns with the principles of effective physical security management, which emphasizes a holistic and integrated system. It directly addresses the identified risks by proposing solutions that are proportionate to the threat and designed to deter, detect, and delay intrusions. This aligns with the general principles of due diligence and duty of care expected of a physical security professional. Implementing only enhanced physical barriers without considering detection and response is professionally unacceptable because it creates a false sense of security. While barriers can deter and delay, they do not provide early warning of breaches, potentially leading to prolonged intrusions and greater damage. This approach fails to meet the standard of a comprehensive security program, focusing solely on advanced electronic detection systems without reinforcing physical barriers is also professionally unsound. Detection systems are crucial for early warning, but without adequate physical barriers, intruders can bypass or overcome detection more easily, negating its effectiveness. This approach neglects the fundamental principle of layered security. Adopting a reactive approach, such as increasing security personnel presence only after incidents occur, is professionally deficient. While personnel are a vital component of security, a purely reactive strategy is inefficient and costly, and it fails to proactively mitigate risks. It does not demonstrate due diligence in anticipating and preventing threats, which is a core responsibility of a physical security professional. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough risk assessment, as indicated by the risk matrix. This assessment should inform the selection of security measures that are proportionate to the identified risks. The framework should then consider the principles of layered security, integrating various security elements, deterrence, detection, delay, response, to create a robust and resilient perimeter. Finally, the chosen strategy should be evaluated for its cost-effectiveness, operational impact, and compliance with relevant industry standards and organizational policies. Question 17. Analysis of the impact of proposed landscaping and terrain modifications on the overall physical security posture of a facility, considering their effectiveness as natural barriers against unauthorized access and their integration with existing security measures, requires a systematic approach to ensure optimal risk mitigation. Which of the following assessment strategies best aligns with the principles of effective physical security planning? Option A. Implementing terrain modifications that create significant elevation changes to deter intruders, without a detailed analysis of potential environmental impacts or how these changes might affect emergency response. Option B. Focusing on the use of dense, thorny vegetation solely for its deterrent effect, without considering how it might impede visibility for security personnel or create hazards for legitimate occupants. Option C. Evaluating how specific plant species and terrain contours can create visual obstructions, funnel movement, and provide natural deterrents, while also assessing their compatibility with surveillance systems and emergency egress routes. Option D. Prioritizing landscaping designs that enhance the aesthetic appeal of the facility, with security considerations being a secondary factor in plant selection and terrain shaping. Correct answer is C. Evaluating how specific plant species and terrain contours can create visual obstructions, funnel movement, and provide natural deterrents, while also assessing their compatibility with surveillance systems and emergency egress routes. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the security benefits of natural barriers with potential environmental and aesthetic considerations, all within the framework of the Physical Security Professional (PSP) exam's implied jurisdiction, which focuses on general best practices and ethical conduct applicable in many professional security contexts, without specifying a particular national regulatory body. The core of the challenge lies in assessing the effectiveness and appropriateness of landscaping and terrain modifications for security purposes, without overstepping into areas of environmental regulation or community relations that are outside the PSP's direct purview, while still adhering to the fundamental principles of risk mitigation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that proposed solutions are both effective and responsible. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of how specific landscaping and terrain features can contribute to deterring, detecting, delaying, and responding to threats, while also considering their integration with existing security systems and protocols. This aligns with the PSP's role in developing and implementing integrated security solutions. The justification for this approach is rooted in the professional obligation to provide effective and efficient security measures that are proportionate to the identified risks. It emphasizes a systematic, evidence-based evaluation of natural barriers as a component of a layered security strategy, consistent with the principles of good security practice. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the aesthetic appeal of landscaping without a thorough security risk assessment. This fails to meet the professional standard of prioritizing security effectiveness and risk mitigation. It represents a failure to apply a security-centric perspective, potentially leading to ineffective deterrents or delays. Another incorrect approach would be to propose landscaping modifications that create unintended security vulnerabilities, such as dense foliage that provides concealment for intruders or terrain that facilitates unauthorized access. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to conduct a thorough impact assessment, directly contradicting the PSP's responsibility to enhance security and not inadvertently compromise it. A further incorrect approach would be to implement landscaping changes without considering their long-term maintenance requirements and potential impact on visibility for surveillance systems. This overlooks critical operational aspects and can lead to a degradation of security effectiveness over time, indicating a failure in comprehensive planning and lifecycle management of security assets. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment, followed by the development of security strategies that incorporate natural barriers as part of a layered defense. This includes evaluating the effectiveness of proposed natural barriers against specific threat profiles, considering their integration with technological and procedural controls, and assessing their potential unintended consequences. Professionals should always prioritize security objectives, ensure compliance with relevant ethical guidelines, and maintain a holistic view of the security environment. Question 18. Compliance review shows a significant increase in false alarm activations across multiple sites over the past quarter, leading to increased operational costs and potential strain on response teams. What is the most effective and compliant approach to address this trend? Option A. Conduct a detailed analysis of alarm event logs to identify common triggers, locations, and contributing factors, and then develop targeted mitigation strategies based on these findings. Option B. Implement a strict policy of financial penalties for all security personnel associated with any false alarm activation, regardless of the cause. Option C. Immediately deactivate any alarm system that has generated more than 2 false alarms in a month to reduce unnecessary dispatches. Option D. Extend the standard response time for all alarm activations by 15 minutes to decrease the frequency of unnecessary site visits. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed analysis of alarm event logs to identify common triggers, locations, and contributing factors, and then develop targeted mitigation strategies based on these findings. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with regulatory compliance and the effective management of security resources. False alarms, while seemingly minor, can lead to significant costs, erode public trust in security systems, and potentially divert critical resources from genuine threats. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing process improvements that are both effective in reducing false alarms and compliant with relevant regulations, without introducing new vulnerabilities or incurring excessive costs. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach focuses on a systematic, data-driven review of alarm event logs to identify patterns and root causes of false alarms. This involves analyzing the types of alarms, their frequency, locations, and contributing factors, e.g., environmental conditions, equipment malfunction, human error. By understanding the underlying issues, targeted mitigation strategies can be developed and implemented, such as recalibrating sensors, improving user training, or enhancing environmental controls. This approach aligns with the principle of continuous improvement, often embedded in security management frameworks and regulatory expectations for effective security operations. It prioritizes understanding and addressing the problem at its source, leading to sustainable reductions in false alarms and optimized resource allocation. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a blanket policy of immediate deactivation for any system experiencing multiple false alarms without investigation fails to address the root cause. This approach is procedurally inefficient, potentially leaving critical areas unprotected and violating the principle of risk-based security management. It also ignores the possibility that the false alarms are symptomatic of a larger issue that, if left unaddressed, could lead to a genuine security breach. Increasing the response time for all alarm events as a cost-saving measure is a direct contravention of security best practices and likely regulatory requirements for timely response to security incidents. This approach prioritizes cost reduction over security effectiveness, increasing the risk of successful intrusion or other security failures. It demonstrates a failure to understand the fundamental purpose of an alarm system. Focusing solely on penalizing security personnel for each false alarm without a comprehensive review of contributing factors is an unfair and ineffective strategy. This approach can lead to a culture of fear and may incentivize personnel to ignore or downplay potential issues to avoid penalties, rather than proactively identifying and resolving problems. It fails to acknowledge that false alarms can stem from system design, environmental factors, or equipment failure, not solely human error. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach false alarm management by first establishing a clear understanding of the problem through data collection and analysis. This involves reviewing alarm logs, incident reports, and system performance data. Based on this analysis, a risk assessment should be conducted to prioritize mitigation efforts. The development and implementation of corrective actions should be data-driven and focused on addressing root causes. Continuous monitoring and evaluation of the effectiveness of these actions are crucial for ongoing process optimization and regulatory compliance. Question 19. System analysis indicates a need to upgrade the biometric access control system for a high-security federal research facility handling sensitive materials. The primary concerns are ensuring robust authentication, minimizing false positives and negatives, and complying with U.S. federal regulations regarding data privacy and security. Which of the following biometric technology combinations would best meet these requirements? Option A, fingerprint and iris scan. Option B, fingerprint only. Option C, facial recognition and voice recognition. Option D, facial recognition only. The correct answer is A, fingerprint and iris scan. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in physical security where the selection of biometric technology must balance effectiveness, cost, and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate technology for a high-security environment, considering the specific vulnerabilities and the need to adhere to relevant U.S. federal regulations and industry best practices for sensitive data handling and privacy. The requirement for a robust, reliable, and legally compliant solution necessitates a thorough understanding of each technology's strengths and weaknesses in the context of the operational environment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves selecting fingerprint and iris scan technologies. This is justified by their established high accuracy rates and reliability in diverse environmental conditions, which are critical for a high-security facility. Fingerprint technology offers a widely accepted and mature biometric solution, while iris scanning provides an exceptionally high level of accuracy and is less susceptible to spoofing than some other methods. Crucially, the U.S. regulatory framework, particularly concerning data privacy and security, e.g., NIST guidelines, potentially HIPAA if health data is involved, or specific agency regulations for federal facilities, emphasizes the need for reliable and secure authentication methods. Implementing both provides a layered security approach, mitigating the risk of single point of failure and enhancing overall assurance, aligning with the principles of robust physical security and data protection mandated by U.S. law and best practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing only facial recognition presents significant regulatory and ethical challenges. While convenient, facial recognition technology's accuracy can be severely impacted by lighting conditions, facial obstructions, masks, hats, and variations in appearance, leading to potential false rejections or acceptances. This unreliability can compromise the security of a high-security facility. Furthermore, the collection and storage of facial data raise substantial privacy concerns under U.S. law, including potential for misuse and the need for stringent consent and data protection measures, which may be more complex to manage compared to fingerprint or iris data. Implementing only fingerprint scanning, while a strong option, might be considered less robust for a truly high-security environment compared to a layered approach. While generally reliable, fingerprint readers can be susceptible to wear and tear, environmental factors, e.g., dirt, moisture, and certain spoofing techniques, potentially creating a single point of vulnerability. Implementing a combination of facial recognition and voice recognition is problematic due to the inherent limitations of both technologies in a high-security context. Voice recognition is highly susceptible to background noise, accents, and even changes in a person's vocal cords due to illness, making it unreliable for critical access control. Combining this with the aforementioned issues of facial recognition creates a system with multiple potential points of failure and significant privacy concerns, failing to meet the stringent security and reliability demands of a high-security facility under U.S. regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing technologies that offer the highest reliability and accuracy for the specific environment, while meticulously considering all applicable U.S. federal and state privacy laws and data protection regulations. This involves evaluating the biometric modalities against established performance metrics and understanding their limitations in real-world conditions. A layered security strategy, employing multiple, complementary biometric technologies, is often the most effective way to achieve the required level of assurance for high-security applications. Furthermore, a thorough privacy impact assessment should be conducted for any biometric system to ensure compliance with regulations like the Privacy Act of 1974 or state-specific privacy laws, and to build public trust. Question 20. Research into the deployment of Advanced Perimeter Intrusion Detection Systems, PIDs, at a U.S.-based critical infrastructure facility has identified several sensor technologies. Considering the absolute priority of regulatory compliance under U.S. federal and state laws, which of the following approaches best ensures that the selected PIDs technology operates legally and ethically? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the facility's specific security needs, and then meticulously research and analyze all applicable U.S. federal regulations, e.g., CFR titles related to privacy and surveillance, and relevant state statutes to ensure the chosen PID's technology and its operational parameters comply with all legal requirements, including data privacy and permissible surveillance methods. Option B. Prioritize the PID's technology that is most cost-effective, as budgetary constraints often dictate the feasibility of implementing security measures, and assume that any technology approved for commercial sale meets all necessary legal standards. Option C. Implement the PID's technology that is most commonly used by similar facilities in the industry, based on trade publications and peer recommendations, as this indicates a de facto standard of compliance. Option D. Select the PID's technology that offers the highest detection rate and broadest coverage area, as determined by manufacturer specifications and independent testing, assuming that enhanced security inherently aligns with regulatory intent. The correct answer is D. Select the PID's technology that offers the highest detection rate and broadest coverage area, as determined by manufacturer specifications and independent testing, assuming that enhanced security inherently aligns with regulatory intent. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a physical security professional to balance the operational effectiveness of intrusion detection systems with strict adherence to regulatory compliance and privacy considerations. The challenge lies in selecting and implementing PID's technologies that meet security objectives without violating established legal frameworks governing data collection and surveillance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen technologies are not only effective in detecting intrusions, but also operate within the boundaries of applicable laws and ethical standards. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the facility's specific security needs and a comprehensive understanding of the relevant U.S. federal and state regulations pertaining to surveillance, data privacy, and the use of sensor technologies in physical security. This includes consulting the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, and any applicable state statutes that govern the deployment and operation of PIDs, particularly concerning the types of data collected, storage, and access. The justification for this approach is rooted in the legal and ethical obligation to operate within the bounds of the law, protecting individual privacy rights while ensuring the security of the premises. This proactive compliance ensures that the chosen PID solution is not only effective but also legally sound, mitigating risks of litigation, fines, and reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize the most advanced or comprehensive sensor technology without first assessing its regulatory implications. This could lead to the selection of systems that inadvertently collect excessive personal data, violate privacy laws, or are not permitted for use in certain environments under federal or state regulations. Such an oversight represents a significant regulatory failure, as it demonstrates a disregard for legal mandates and could result in non-compliance penalties. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on manufacturer specifications for compliance without independent verification. Manufacturers may highlight features that meet general security standards, but may not fully address the nuances of specific U.S. federal or state privacy laws. This approach risks misinterpreting or overlooking critical regulatory requirements, leading to a system that is non-compliant despite the vendor's assurances. This constitutes an ethical failure by not exercising due diligence in ensuring the legality of the security measures. A third incorrect approach is to implement a PID solution based on industry best practices alone, without a specific regulatory review. While industry best practices are valuable, they do not supersede legal requirements. A system that is considered best practice in some contexts might be illegal or non-compliant in others due to specific jurisdictional laws. This approach fails to meet the absolute priority of regulatory compliance, potentially exposing the organization to legal repercussions. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should begin with a clear identification of the security objectives. This should be immediately followed by a comprehensive research phase focused on identifying all applicable U.S. federal and state regulations that govern the proposed security measures, particularly those related to surveillance and data privacy. A risk assessment should then be conducted to evaluate how different PIDs technologies align with these regulations. Finally, A selection process should prioritize solutions that meet both security needs and regulatory mandates, with documentation of the compliance review process.